Yeah. Plus, it's always fun watching they dominate, even if it happened 20 years ago.
Because I'm really bad. I hear about it. I don't use that often. It is 7 p.m., so I will call the meeting to order. If you could please stand for the pledge. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, and welcome to the October 10th, 2022 business meeting of the Milford Board of Education. Ms. Griffin, can we have a roll call for attendance, please?
Catherine Ailing.
Here.
Adam DeYoung.
Here.
Megan Doyle.
Here.
Andrew Fowler.
Here.
Tracy Irby. Here. Emily McDonough Souza.
Here.
Una Petrosky.
Here.
Betsy Ratner. Here. Cindy Wolf Boynton.
Here.
And Susan Glennon.
Here.
All members present.
Thank you. Student reports. I think foreign goes first this evening, so we have Venice, Montanaro, and Connor Nyman.
Yep. So good evening, everyone. I'm glad to be speaking in front of you guys again for the latest events going on in our school. So leading up to the pep rally last Friday, students had their second Spirit Week of the year, and Monday started off fall theme with the Flannel Day, Tuesday was Pink Day in support of Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and then Thursday was Grout Fit Day, and Friday was Color Wars. So the freshmen were encouraged to wear red, sophomores blue, juniors white, and seniors black to show their school spirit at the pep rally. And most importantly, throughout the Spirit Week, members of the Student Council also sold pink eye black during the lunch waves. So each set of eye black cost $2, and all proceeds went towards the Get in Touch Foundation, which is a Milford-based nonprofit focused on providing women with strategies on how to best prevent breast cancer. And to show additional support for the organization, students also participated in a pink out at Friday night's home football game against East Haven, so that was a really good thing. And on the topic of sports, boys cross country placed 4th overall in a meet at Eisenhower Park on Monday behind Notre Dame, Brantford, Wilbercross, and Law. But they beat North Haven and Fairfield Prep. And then girls cross country also had their Laurelton Hall Classic meet on Monday and placed 2nd to Wilbercross, but defeated Law, Laurelton, Sacred Heart Academy, North Haven, and Brantford. And boys soccer lost their 2 matches this week to Wilbercross and Cheshire, but have matches against North Haven and Cheshire again up next for chances to redeem themselves. And girls soccer recently defeated Guilford for a big win. It was a win that they hadn't gotten in a while, but fell short against Mercy High School. And in addition, the volleyball team also defeated Hill House and Shelton last week, but lost to West Haven, leaving them with a winning record of 2-1. And the football team defeated East Haven last Friday, leaving them undefeated at 4-0 with their next game at Brantford. And lastly, girls swimming and diving faced off against Amity Regional and Lyman Hall. It didn't come away with a win, but have an opportunity to do so against Shelton and Guilford next meet. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to speaking with all of you again in November.
So, good evening, everyone. So this month we've had some really incredible events that I can't wait to continue to fill you in on. So different departments in our school have been doing some really interesting things. The art department has been exploring different types of photography, as well as Mendi, which is henna art. The world language department had AP Spanish and Spanish 5 students at Foreign and Law celebrate Hispanic Heritage Month on the New Haven Green. Our physical education department has been working through yoga and meditation practices, which is a really cool way to have a break during the day. Our culinary department has been making many yummy recipes, including homemade chocolate pudding, flatbread, pizza, buttermilk pancakes, and my favorite, which were the pumpkin scones. So we just had an exciting event last week where we honored all the different after-school clubs and activities that we provide. So at the student-led event, almost every club was represented by the officers with posters, demonstrations, flyers, activities, and sign-up sheets. So some clubs that we have included the Giving Table, Key Club, Visual Arts Club, Robotics, Drama, and more. And we also have some new clubs, including crocheting, fishing, health professionals, and book club. So the club fair was a huge success and occurred during student advisories, where they were able to explore what we have to offer at Ford. Our journalism classes have also been doing many incredible things, including new fundraisers with merchandise to support Foreign. And they also just celebrated 10 years of the Main Street Mirror, which is our school newspaper run by students in our journalism classes. It was really cool to see the October issue and to see all of our students' hard work this year. So last Friday, our natural helpers and custodial staff helped to decorate our cafeteria for our Hollywood homecoming. So it was an incredible night with seniors Jonna Lord and Matthew Miller crowned homecoming king and queen, and it was really awesome to see everyone gathered together and having fun. And lastly, on this Wednesday, freshmen, sophomores, and juniors will take part in the PSATs, where seniors get to participate in a college and career exploration day. Our seniors are also given the opportunity for a field trip this Thursday, where we will go to New Haven for a college fair field trip. Also, college representatives have visited in the past few weeks and will continue to do so, which is a really good opportunity for seniors to learn more. Thank you all for your time, and we are excited to see you next month and share our Lion Pride with you all.
Thank you. Next, we have from Jonathan Law, Aylin Burns, and Cole Wyman.
All right, thank you and good evening, board members. It is a pleasure to be with you once again. I will begin tonight with some law-amazing news. On September 23rd, Law hosted Freshman Welcome Day, so at the start of the day, there was a team-building activity with spaghetti towers and a Kahoot about law. We then had presentations given by upperclassmen leaders about academics, athletics, extracurriculars, and what it means to be a lawman. This was followed by a club fair and a picnic for all freshmen. We also hosted Spirit Week with themes of Pajama Day, Jersey Day, Anything But a Backpack Day, Red, White, and Blue Day, and Color Wars. Our pep rally was run by the fall sports captains, celebrating the kickoff of our fall sports as well as our first home football game. We had a tug-of-war contest and taught each of the classes of law some of our cheers. The band visited the Big E and had the opportunity to perform there, and the choir took a trip to Yukon for the Young Conductors Symposium. Law also hosted class elections this past week and had many candidates running for positions in each grade. There was a lot of great campaigning throughout the week with posters. The Law Girls Swim and Dive team raised a total of $2,300 for breast cancer research at Yale through the Lionheart Foundation, and both the Law and Forum Swim and Dive teams competed the Lapathon together this Saturday and were the top fundraisers in the SCC, raising a combined total of $3,800, which all goes straight to cancer research. Law's Safe Promise Club ran Start With Hello Week, which aims to reduce social isolation and suicide among teenagers. This week was all about positivity, being inclusive, and making the school community more welcoming. The club had different activities each day, like positive chalk messages, passing out name tags, a green out in honor of mental health awareness and suicide prevention, and positive Post-its. Now a little bit about academics. The English department is continuing to work on expanding classroom libraries to support independent reading, and they're partnering with the National Art Honor Society to paint the walls of the English Support Center to make it look more creative and inviting for students. In recognition of National Hispanic Heritage Month, students in Spanish 5 research the lives of famous Hispanic people and are sharing a new person each day on Eagle Eye News. Students in AP Spanish and Spanish 5 also traveled to New Haven on September 29th to take part in a Hispanic celebration, including dancing and food. The TLC has checked out a total of 450 books this school year, and the school also celebrated Banned Books Weeks with a special display and book talk. Debate teams are also arguing about book banning in Model UN for their mock trials. And finally, students at the help desk have been fully trained in navigating incident IQ and Chromebook repairs, and they can repair broken Chromebooks and get them ready to be swapped out.
In Law Sports action, our fall teams are in the middle portion of the regular seasons as they look to continue strong towards playoff season. Our boys and girls cross-country teams competed at the Wickham Park Invitational this past weekend, which is also the site of the upcoming state championship meet. Our football team has started out their season also 4-0 and play Lyman Hall this Friday after their bye this past week. Boys and girls soccer are both hopeful of qualifying for the respective state tournaments. Girls swimming and diving have seen incredible individual performances as they compete in a very talented SEC Division I. Girls volleyball currently has a 6-5 record as they look to finish their season off strong. Congratulations to the following student athletes as they look to following student athletes who have earned individual honors so far for this fall. JLHS Sports Booster Club Student Athletes of the Month for September were Liam Fedigan and Gianna Gagliardi. John Nider earned SEC Male Student Athlete of the Month honors for September. John was selected as the only male recipient of this award out of the SEC's 23 member schools. Updates from the School Counseling and College Career Center. School counselors were pleased to meet with both new freshman families and senior families on the night of open house during their meet and greet and coffee chats. It was a way to create new connections, plus check in with returning families. This week, the department will be taking approximately 45 junior students on a field trip to University of New Haven to participate in the NEA CAC College Fair. Students have an opportunity to meet with admissions counselors from over 150 college universities. The end of September kicked off our weekly college visits. Approximately 3 colleges visit law each day during the month. Junior and senior students participate in small group sessions where they connect directly with admissions counselors and have the chance to ask questions about the school and application processes. Thank you for this opportunity to speak with you all, and we look forward to the next meeting.
Thank you very much, students. You're free to head out if you've got some things to do. We won't be offended.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Is there anyone in the audience this evening from the public who'd like to make public comment? If you're seeing none, I'll dispense with the public comment statement and move on to the chair's report. Board members, you have before you the second reading of our GP 12 Board Operations Revision. This was presented to you last month in order to bring our policy processes for meetings in line with the current state statute, which allows us the option to meet virtually if we feel that's appropriate. We went through this last month. There were no suggested revisions. There were no questions or concerns raised. So I'll ask Ms. Petrowski if she has a motion to start off.
A motion that the Milford Board of Education approves Board Policy Governance Process GP-12 Board Operations as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Fowler. Do we have any further comments or discussion from board members? Okay, seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Move on to, I'm sorry, let's see, the rest of my board chair's report. We have, our CAPE conference is coming up next month, so board members, you haven't sent the information on that. If you, have any interest in attending, please let Ms. Griffin know as soon as possible. And I also would like to report, I'm saddened to report that Ms. Ratner has submitted her letter of resignation from the board effective on October 25th, which is after our next meeting, our committee of the whole meeting, due to her planned move from Milford to be closer to her family. In accordance with state statute and the board's policy GP-19, a nomination to fill the vacancy will be made by Ms. Ratner's first district party members and then voted on by the majority vote of the remaining elected members for our board, from our board. I expect that will occur at our November business meeting. Ms. Ratner has been a valued member of our board since 2019, and I think I can speak for all in saying that we will greatly miss her contributions to the board, to our work, which has been displayed through her exuberance, her thoughtfulness, and her clear devotion to considering the whole child. I've known Ms. Ratner for a long time because my children had her. I know some board members also had Ms. Ratner as a teacher when she taught in Milford Public Schools. And we wish you the best on your next journey, but we will miss you very much. So thank you, Betsy. Do we have liaison reports this evening? I did attend the PTA council meeting last month and provided, at their request, a brief overview of the role of the board. And we will, I promised I would keep them abreast of additional things that might come up, particularly around budget time. So, with no other reports, moving on to superintendent's report.
Thank you, Ms. Lennon. Happy to start the report off with a topic that we've talked about before. I actually looked it up exactly a year ago. At the business meeting in October, we had a presentation by some of our middle school administrators on the new middle school schedule and programming there. So just wanted to give the board an update on where things are at with programming in our middle schools. and the 2.0 version of our schedule, and maybe even beyond. So I'll turn things over to Dr. Fettigan.
Thank you, Dr. Butai. Good evening, members of the board. Tonight we are joined by Mr. Ken Hayes, who is Assistant Principal of West Shore Middle School, Mr. Steve Gottlieb sitting right next to him, Principal of Harborside Middle School. They will primarily narrate our slides this evening, but I also want to indicate that Mrs. Carlson is in the back row, Principal of East Shore Middle School, and next to her, Sarah Gallipoli, who is supervising middle school special education programming. A familiar face, Dr. Gillespie, who was here recently to talk with us about social emotional learning and support services. So we'll certainly hit a little bit on that tonight with comprehensive school counseling. And Carrie Kramis is here with us, middle school principal at West Shore, and next to her, Sarah Harris Brewer, who is our instructional supervisor of humanities. Not all of our instructional supervisors are here tonight, but we certainly have a representative grouping tonight who can speak to their departments if there are questions later, and of course for some of our colleagues who might not be in attendance. As Dr. Kutaya mentioned, it's hard to imagine, but in the middle of the pandemic, really in 2020, engaged in a district study around middle school programming. We first were talking about schedule as really like an operational piece, right? And as we went into that journey of studying and engaging in the research and thinking about best practices, our language and our intent became a little bit more sophisticated to move from just scheduling, what happens right with an operational bell schedule. We started to think a little bit more about programming. As you know, in 21-22 last year, we engaged in the 1.0 version of the schedule. We heard some feedback from our staff and from students, and we made some modifications, which now result in this 2.0 schedule that we are, I will say, only in about 1 month, right, maybe 6 weeks of school experiencing this 2.0 schedule. So we're going to tonight tell you a little bit about our journey, where we came from with 1.0, where we are today, and as Dr. Kutaya said, maybe a little bit of a signal about where we plan to go next in the way of more information about programming. We'll be able to address that certainly with questions at the end of Mr. Gottlieb's and Mr. Hayes' commentary. So I'll turn it over to them now.
Thank you, Dr. Fettigan.
You're welcome.
As Dr. Fettigan shared, we're going to give a little journey about where we've been, where we are, and where we're going. So after looking at the 1.0 version of the schedule and hearing feedback from families, teachers, administrators, students, we started looking at some programmatic changes that we wanted to do. And from that came some of these highlights on the screen that you see in front of you. One of them was optimize instructional time. We're trying to find that sweet spot for time with students, sort of like the Hansel and Gretel situation. Not Hansel and Gretel, Goldilocks. It's been a while since I read it to my kids. Sorry about that. So, we had, during COVID, we had the 80-minute blocks, a little too long. Then prior to COVID, we had about 48 minutes, give or take, a little too short. So now we landed right now about 58 minutes. And we're finding that's the sweet spot. And later on in the video, you'll hear about that from one of our teachers. We also were trying to maximize or minimize and maximize support for students and providing, instead of taking them out and delivering instructional services in a different manner, push in, so to speak. We also wanted to create more opportunities as we move forward for voice and choice and for more CTE in all grade levels. In this version right now that we have CTE, which is Tech, Career and Tech Ed, in grade 6. Previous versions of schedules, we did not have that. So moving forward, and Mr. Hayes will mention as we go on further into the presentation, a little bit more what that might look like as we move forward into versions 3, 4, and so forth. Maintain morning meeting, which is very important regarding our social and emotional learning for our students. Also, we want to incorporate more school-wide comprehensive school counseling. Sort of think about it as tier 1 intervention or counseling for all students. Get them in right, when they see the students and build those relationships early on throughout their course of the schooling. And then, of course, provide enrichment for all students. We started developing courses where there's enrichment for all students in STEM math, STEM science, humanities social studies, and humanities ELA. And each year we're looking to provide different programming on that as well. Some of the things that this schedule allows us to do, although not ideal, is to provide ways that we can continually, at the moment, share staff across all grade levels. Again, not best practice at the moment, but it's something that later down the road, we, through programming, will be able to prevent as we move forward in later iterations of the schedule. And also, what we also did in this current version of the schedule is we allowed for more opportunity for specialists to be able to have collaboration time with each other, but also with the core content teachers, so that they could have embedded learning as far as related to HQI. I think that's you, and then lastly, before I pass the clicker over to Mr. Hayes, this is a quick snapshot of the daily schedule. You will see there's 6 blocks. Those blocks, it's not block scheduling, so it's time blocks. So there's actually 6 periods in a day, but there's 6 time blocks. They're all about 58 minutes long. Block 4 is a little bit longer because that's where we have lunch time. And then it currently rotates. Now we have 8 periods, but we drop 2 every day. So it's an 8-day cycle.
All right. So I am going to take you on our journey, and I'm going to make some parallels to the evolution of the cell phone. Now I'm looking around and I'm kind of feeling the room. Some of you might not have had the experience of an 80s cell phone, but let me tell you, if you look at that cell phone, right, it was innovative. It was a catalyst for big thinking. If you look all the way over to the right, our smartphones, right? It was great. But there were some inherent issues with that cell phone. It was cumbersome. The battery wasn't great. You could probably only call somebody else who may have had a cell phone if they were lucky enough. At that time, most likely you were calling a landline. So there were limitations in that structure. So when I look at that 80s phone, I think of our schedule that we had. It provided a structure, but it didn't provide flexibility for us to be responsive to programming needs. And with every iteration of the cell phone, there comes some new bells and whistles, right? So I'm looking around again. I don't think some of you had the experience of pressing number 2 3 times to get a letter C, right? But it was still better than that first version. You weren't really able to text with that first phone, right? So when I look at our journey, I look at that flip phone as phase 1.0. And what were we able to accomplish? Dr. Fettigan pointed out, we engaged on a district-wide research-based committee that included all stakeholders. We felt strongly that we had a really solid outline for a schedule that could be responsive to student programming needs. There was still work to be done. That takes us to the BlackBerry, right? Much easier to text, right? Mm-hmm. Some of us are old guys, just use one finger. My daughters and the young people use both of their hands. They become very adept at that. But phase 2.0 also allowed us to be responsive to student needs. We've mentioned social emotional learning throughout this presentation. We kept our extended homeroom, building a sense of community and belonging. We also were able to incorporate comprehensive school counseling. We have the ability to be proactive and not reactive. I think that's really important. Takes us now to phase 3.0. So phase 2.0 is what we're currently living, and we've only been in that for about a month or so. But we also know that we have to be responsive to programming needs in our vision for the future. That includes things that we're going to be talking about in a little bit. So, I've said a lot, but I really want you to listen to the staff and the students, the most important people in NPS, and they're going to concretize some of my thinking, some of what I've shared with you.
The time change has been a big improvement as well. I've taught classes over my career of 44 minutes. I've taught classes as long as 80 or 90 minutes, and this year with 58 minutes, it really seems to be a sweet spot. It allows plenty of time for in-depth, rich conversation with students. We don't have to feel rushed through conversations, but it's also a developmentally appropriate length of time. Beyond that hour, students really start to lose focus, so it's been a great time length this year.
In music class, the new schedule allows us to see the students more frequently, which allows us to have a better continuity with lesson planning, and it also lets us build better relationships with students because we're seeing them more often. The hour-long class is actually better for music students because they would get fatigued at about the hour mark in the previous schedule, and now we can get more quality instruction going on during that 1 hour time.
It was very easy adjusting to the new schedule. I like that we get more classes in a day because if I have one class and I don't like it or I get stressed out if I have a test or something, I can go to my other class and kind of like debrief and feel better about it and not have to sit there for 80 minutes. So it's very active of us going to the different classes. And I really like it, so I think it was very easy adjusting to it.
I think the length is good because for the students last year, staying in one place, I know in elementary school you stay in one place for 6 hours, but I think it's easier as you're going into different subjects and different teachers. You don't want to stay with one teacher for too long and then stay with the other for too long. And I think it's just really good to get like movement as you're walking through classes.
I like how the classes are shorter. There's more movement throughout my day. There's more gym and band. The day, it feels like it goes by faster with the shorter schedule, even though it's the same length. And I like having a choice between having Spanish or French, like the language classes. With the more classes, there's more people I meet and different people, so it's different faces throughout my day.
We see our students all year long, from grade 6 through 8. So definitely more consistency leads to stronger connections, better teacher-student relationships, and it will increase activity time as well, and it will help to refine their skill development, which is great.
In Tech Ed, when I first got in there, it was a very welcoming place. Mr. Crooks helped a lot with making me feel welcomed and comfortable in the area. I very much enjoy it, and it's helping me prepare a lot for high school. And I really like how I get to see my teachers more often, and it's also made me a lot more comfortable in the classroom and made it easier for me to learn.
Oh my, they're fantastic. For a lot of reasons. First of all, previously we'd only had 7th and 8th graders, and the chance to get the 6th graders is great because of the ability to make connections with the kids. So to kind of get them as 6th graders really gives me the chance to make better connections with them so that in 7th grade we just kind of jump right into the routine and it works better.
Well, as students enter the middle school with 5 or 6 years of experience with Spanish already, I definitely see the World Language Department growing considerably. It's my hope that in 6th grade, students will have more language instruction than the current 6th grade exploratory program. While this may require more staffing, I think it will strengthen the middle school world language experience for students. The curriculum will need to be rewritten so that we can appropriately challenge our students who are entering with significant background knowledge of both language skills and cultural awareness.
Another language that I would think would work out in middle school or any level would, I think, because we already have a language like Spanish and French from Europe, I think maybe another language from either Africa or like Asia would help so everyone has another language. Maybe like something that's frequently used, Japanese, Chinese, African, anything that expands what we already have.
Throughout the pandemic, we really saw an increase in students who were struggling with anxiety and depression and were anxious in and outside of school. Our course allows students to identify and recognize what coping skills they can use in and outside of school. Throughout this class, students will be learning about conflict resolution, decision-making, internet safety, executive functioning, as well as college and career readiness, by beginning to look at different careers that they might want to explore and different pathways that they can further learn about when they're at the high school level.
So some of the experiences I've had with this class is mostly how to learn about ourselves, assumptions, what to do when we need an enrollment. Let's say we're having some drama with some friends. This class has helped me learn what to do, how to deal with it.
Yeah, just given a rotation with the students where I can see them more often, it's wonderful.
So I would be remiss too if I didn't mention that a lot of the programming that there we go. A lot of the programming that we have incorporated and that we're thinking about is aligned to established pathways. So when I think about that career in tech ed in 6th grade, part of their experience is coding and robotics, directly aligned to pathways we have established. So I wanted to now pivot and talk a little bit about the future and what we envision, right? We have a schedule, a structure that provides us flexibility to be responsive to programming needs. You've listened to student and staff voice about those programming needs, and just to think or give you some ideas about our thinking, we want to provide student voice and choice. And we're thinking of developing curriculum and experiences directly related to existing career paths and possibly building new career paths. We spoke a little bit and you heard a little bit about expanding world language, and you're going to be hearing more about that during budget season. And I also wanted to mention some of the flex furniture. Just having kids walk into a classroom and feel that they can sit in something comfortable or something that meets their needs so they are focused and ready to learn. That takes us to the end of our presentation. And if anybody has any questions, we'd be glad to answer them.
Thank you. Questions from board members? Ms. Ratner.
Thank you, Ms. Clinton. First of all, this is so exciting to know where we were at the 1.0 and see it go in this direction. It gives me a lot of thrill. One thing I was curious about is as we do the voice and choice, is a lot of it started with an independent and then it moves into a collaborative connection of a group? Or is it always with group, and how the initial topic or idea or research comes about? I guess it's part of the voice and choice, but looking at the independent and the group processing with the divergent thinking, et cetera.
You want to go or you want me to go?
I'll let you go and then I'll follow up. How's that?
It's a little bit of both, to be quite honest with you. We want to survey the students, find out what they're interested in, obviously, find out what the staff is interested, and maybe even see what the parents would love to see for their kids. And bring, just like we did with the schedule, bring that information to the teachers and to the administrators and to see what we can develop that will able to engage the kids in agency and figuring out how they want to work things and ultimately give them more ownership of what they get to take when they're in middle school. You want to add anything?
So I think when we think about voice and choice, right, we can look at voice and choice in two different ways. So I think the voice and choice that you're referring to is we certainly want to give students within classrooms as many opportunities as we can for voice and choice, whether that's in an ELA classroom, a language arts classroom where they're choosing books, right, and they're having opportunities for collaborative work, like you mentioned, and they're also having some opportunities for independent thinking and independent work and kind of bringing those pieces together. We also want to look at voice and choice from a programmatic lens, right? So thinking about how we can create opportunities for choice for students before they've even selected courses, right? So thinking big picture about our middle school program. Are there opportunities for us to create electives, for instance, maybe in the area of tech, right? So this year we were able to add our grade 6 tech program. They're doing coding. They're able to really engage in some of that STEM pathway work. We'd like to think about how we can expand opportunities for them when it comes to choosing the courses they take in middle school. In the area of world language, right? We heard our students saying, we have French, we have Spanish, but what else is out there, right? We know there are so many languages available, and our students will be having the opportunity to study Spanish from pre-K through 5, which is incredibly exciting. So what's next for them? So how can we expand possibilities in the area of world language, whether that means adding additional language experiences through different languages, and or expanding the possibilities within our Spanish and French curriculum to think differently about how we teach Spanish and French in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade.
And just to add on to that, thinking about STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, well, what if we threw art in there? And that's research-based. So now you're turning STEM into STEAM. And what are the possibilities that we could utilize art teachers to support our STEM instruction? That's the big picture thinking that we're all thinking about. But to your point, we really do need some directions from our stakeholders, our students, our families. What is it that they see in our community, right? What skills, job skills do kids need when they graduate so they're career ready? And what can we do in middle and high school to address that?
Thank you, Edmund.
Ms. McDonough Souza?
Thank you. You had mentioned in the Phase 2.0 slide the staffing impact that it makes accommodations for shared staff across elementary and secondary levels. Can you speak more on that? Is that just, are you talking about like hiring challenges, or what are we referring to there with the shared staff? And you said I think you said it wasn't optimal, but we're dealing with it now.
Right now we have, in middle school, I'll speak to that because that's what we currently share music teachers. Harborside shares with East Shore, West Shore shares actually with
elementary.
So when we look at, as we start moving through programming, we, depending on what we offer for the kids, it may be more centralized depending on what the students want to take. And, it may look at a situation, it may become, as we get more into budgeting down the road, it may be looking at FTEs based on what the kids are taking.
So in that example of the music teachers, if a ton of middle school students, a ton more want to take music classes, then
like specific music classes or ensembles or something like that, we most likely be looking at different avenues to be able to adjust the staffing to that.
Okay. All right, thank you.
That was my question too. Mr. Dion?
Thank you. When you guys came in front of us to present Phase 1, you gave a somewhat detailed example of what the schedule would look like. And I know you have sort of timing in here, but could you talk about that a little bit? At that meeting, you talked about like an enrichment block that there was. Is that still in existence? What does that look like? Does it still look exactly the same as it was before?
So we still have enrichment for all. So Mr. Gottlieb pointed out we have STEM, math, STEM science, we have humanities, social studies, humanities ELA. But we also have identified enrichment students. And those identified enrichment students have a teacher, and we have a schedule where that teacher, he's shared between elementary schools and middle schools, but we have a specific schedule where he's at our buildings on Fridays in the morning and in the afternoon, and we rotate obviously because there's 3 buildings. But that gives him an opportunity to check in with each student, maybe develop some project-based learning around student interests that are aligned with what they're studying or what they want to learn about, and more importantly, touching base with the teachers so they can work collaboratively to provide the best experience for students in and out of the classroom.
So the enrichment for all classes that you mentioned, the STEM, math, STEM, science, are those the same ones that were presented Because at the time when you presented 1.0, there was talk about we're gonna try these out and see how they work and then be flexible with it.
Great question. So one of the things that we've utilized this year is a platform called Defined Learning. And Defined Learning is a free platform that it's really offered through the state of Connecticut. And within that platform, there are many enrichment opportunities. So we, over the summer, engaged our departments in some of that work so they could identify, hey, here's something our kids might be interested in. So when the student is in enrichment, they have some choice. They have an ability to go through and say, you know what, this is something I'm really interested in. And then the teacher facilitates that learning. Adds, here's some articles, here's some books that go along with what you're studying. And ultimately, you know, at the end of that, they're going to produce something that is aligned to their area of study. Whether it's a slideshow, a video, they have some autonomy in that, and they work collaboratively with the teacher to decide what's the best avenue to share my thinking.
So Mr. Hayes, and I think Mrs. Brewer is going to comment on this right now. We wrote courses last year, for example, on financial literacy. There was a community impact course. So can you also give some more information about how those are running this year and any modifications that have been made?
Sure. So our 6th grade enrichment courses are continuing to run as they did last year, but we were able to bring the 6th grade teachers together, have them reflect on their experience during the first year, as we do with any curriculum, and really work through the revision process to make any changes and adjustments, as well as to look at systems and structures, because we recognize that our block periods were a little bit different this year. But they will continue to, for example, engage in the trial of characters throughout literature in 6th grade. And to create a project based on solving a community issue or platform that they select in their social studies enrichment opportunities. For 7th and 8th grade, we've had the opportunity to really focus on project-based learning. So all of these experiences in math, science, social studies, and ELA are interdisciplinary experiences. So while they're being taught by an English teacher or a social studies teacher, you know, as with any experience in any of our classrooms, they're using skills and knowledge from all of their content areas. So for example, in one of our STEM enrichment classes, students are exploring the development of 3D printed prosthetics for animals, which I think is incredibly interesting. And you can imagine it's something that middle school students probably haven't thought all that much about, but now have the opportunity to look at that from a tech perspective, from a science perspective, from a math perspective, as well as doing a lot of reading about what that might look like. And I believe they might actually be doing some of that printing through their tech classes, which brings it to life and makes it authentic. We also have an experience where students are doing some argumentative writing in their ELA classes, and they're thinking about fuel efficiency in cars and how we develop more fuel efficient cars and whether we should be developing more fuel efficient cars. In social studies, they're thinking about how we as citizens in a community develop a campaign platform and how we use reading, writing, listening, and thinking skills to do that. So you can see that each of the topics ties to the content area of the teacher who is teaching the class, but inherently the students are really tackling the project with skills that they're pulling in from all of their classes.
So for the 6th grade has specific enrichment for all classes, is that right?
6th, 7th, and 8th.
Oh, they all have it,
Yep.
okay.
Yep.
And so it's a specific block?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, it's part of the block, yeah.
Part of the schedule, right?
Part
So
of
it
the
might be a
schedule.
different period for different students, just as.
Right, so it's not set time every day for every
Right.
kid. Yeah, okay, all right, thank you very much.
Yeah, of course.
To piggyback on something that Ms. Harris Brewer, I'm sorry, Mr. G, I don't know, I answered it, hey. A quick example of what, I was in one of the 8th grade classrooms, and it's amazing how a 13-year-old brain works. Because one of the students found a Ferrari that is fuel efficient for 46 miles per gallon. He's like, there you go. I'm like, that's not really practical. So it fuels those conversations about where they really are. And, you know, it's interesting to hear their thinking and what they're trying to do.
We literally heard today about the prosthetic for a penguin.
We did, yes.
So, right, when we were having a visit over at West Shore Middle School. So it's exciting to see kids having, beyond traditional standards and core curricular areas, opportunities to really engage in inquiry, right?
Absolutely.
Throughout 6th through 8th grade. So we did repeat some of those experiences as we built last year, but last year was kind of like the first 3 courses. And so we had some kids returning, right, as 7th and 8th graders. It was all new for our 6th graders this year, but we need to continue to innovate from a curriculum perspective.
That's great, thank you all, appreciate it.
Other questions from board members? Ms. Petrosky?
So I think all this sounds really exciting, and I like the fact that you've hit the sweet spot, because I know that's a challenge to get to. I did have one question, though, on the 4th block, which is the class and lunch. So I see that the 6th graders sort of have that broken time. I don't know if you used the term correctly. Is there other challenges that are presented by having that?
Well, it's interesting you say that. In the version 1.0, there was huge challenges because it was an actual content. It was ELA or math being split. So in the spring, we shared, a draft of this schedule, and through feedback from the 6th grade teachers at the schools, they came up with an idea. Well, if we move this period here, which happens to be 5th period for them, it doesn't interfere with a teaching block. What it does is actually it now allows them 30 minutes or 28 minutes, give or take, of an extra hit with their content area. So if I have ELA today, I might have an extra 28 minutes with my ELA teacher to, get support on some skills that I don't get in the classroom, or I need some additional support, or students might be working on a project. It's not additional class time, but it's additional time to help support the students. They go to lunch, and then they go after that, there's what we call ASA, which is Academic Success for All. So some kids might go see a resource teacher for what they need. Kids may go see a teacher to get help for a quiz that they might be doing or that stuff. So based on the feedback from the 6th grade teachers, we were able to split a period that wasn't a content time period. Inevitably, there had to be a split somewhere, and we figured that, based on their feedback, that was the best way to do it.
Thank you, that was great.
Ms. Whiten?
It's not a question, just a comment that I think it would be lovely at some point if the board could see some of this in action in the middle schools. We've seen some really cool stuff with the elementary, but it's from just thinking back to when I had middle school age children, it's kind of the time, I don't know what to put the right descriptor in there.
Really trying to find themselves?
It's a little challenging, right? They have a lot going on, and academic engagement always isn't at the top of the list, or understanding the importance of it. So I think it would be very meaningful to see how they are engaging and, using their inquisitiveness and real world hands-on problems to, move themselves ahead.
Good feedback, thank you.
Any other questions from board members? Mr. Dion?
Just one other question, if you could talk a little bit further about the counseling piece of this. We saw the counselors in the video talking about a class that they're running. I assume they're also available for students individually, but there's a class that's running as well?
Dr. G. Dr.
We
Gillespie.
are so excited that we now have an assured experience for all students in our middle schools, that they will receive direct instruction around the standards outlined in the Connecticut Framework for School Counseling. But to your point, if you recall, many other times I've visited your meetings, we are so fortunate that we were able to double the presence of our counselors in the middle school and really to leverage this end. So currently, our school counselors are engaging in classroom instruction for half of the time, and the other half of the time is working individually or in small groups as the more traditional role that we're used to. And it's something that we're working through this year. It's a new experience. But again, just so excited that this is now something that is reaching every student and that they're receiving that direct instruction. And we're continuing to modify and really support them as we go through. This is definitely a shift. But we think this is really the next step to really empowering our middle school students.
That's great.
Can I just add that our school counselors work really in a or interdisciplinary team with our social workers and our school psychologists. So when we're talking about comprehensive school counseling, we're really aligning to the ASCA framework, which are the national standards, and really trying to adhere to the recommendations for counselors providing direct instruction and, you know, whole group, kind of that proactive piece that you heard Mr. Brown speak about before. Those lessons, and then also on balance, right, meeting with the small group and individual students for different counseling needs.
So do they push into a particular subject area, or do they have their own block, or how does that work?
It's really exciting that before they used to push into health classes,
Okay.
and they would push into certain advisory lessons, and it was very sporadic throughout the year. You know, maybe 2 or 3 times a year they would have, you know, that direct interaction. Whereas now for a quarter, they have they're teaching a course built around those standards, and it's right now we are looking. It's occurring for all 6th, 7th, and 8th graders for at least a quarter of the year. So
That's great.
yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Sorry, Ms. Doyle? Mr. Dion's question kind of prompted this. One of the other things you discussed was the size of the music and might need to, as we increase the offerings, that need more teachers. We are going to talk about later about the size of average classrooms, specifically in the lower grades, but we don't really talk about it too much in high school and middle school. But in these sort of situations, what is the average class size? Like, what is the goal within it? I mean, it just sounds like a lot more moving pieces and may require in time as we offer more opportunities in voice and choice.
I may mispronounce your last name, Ms. Boynton.
Yes.
To her statement about middle schoolers are all over the place. So lower the better, to answer your question, because, you know, if you have a middle schooler, it's easier that way. But usually the sweet spot's around, you know, anywhere from 16 to 20. It could depend on the activity. Like tech ed, you start pushing over 20, then you got machines involved. And you need to have someone being on top of that, making sure that happens.
Mr. Gottlieb, that's a great example though, tech ed, because changing from the different iterations of the schedule, we were able to reduce the class sizes in tech ed. I don't know if anybody in the audience wants to comment, or Mr. Gottlieb specifically about that. I know Mrs. Swanson would want us to mention that if she were here today.
Yes. So the prior iterations of the schedule, class sizes in tech ed were 27, 28, 29, all of our schools. With this current iteration moving to quarters, again, more aligned with high school, we've reduced class size to about 17.
18 to 20.
17, 18.
It really depends on the school because each grade is different. So that becomes.
And so in the same way, the students aren't moving in teams, like the team is always together. I mean, as a Harborside graduate from 1999.
I wasn't there.
So the answer to that is no. Most students have a varying schedule throughout the day. They may have a few classes together,
Okay.
but kids aren't tracked or
They're
grouped.
much more.
Yes, there's a
free
lot more
movement.
voice and choice and agency throughout their day.
We do have middle teams in grade 6, but 7th and 8th grade is more like junior high model. And when we say teams for 6th grade, it's the core. When they go to the unified arts, they're all intermixed.
Just I'm gonna make some connections for you and the board. Last month, we talked about AP scores, and we talked about offering higher level courses, ECE, and that we have to be comfortable with smaller class sizes, the more specialized we become in course offerings. So while there may be a sweet spot in the world of class size in core programming, math, science, social studies, English language arts, when we start looking at voice choice electives, particularly starting in 6th grade, going through 12th, we may need to become more comfortable with smaller class sizes and increased FTEs. And that, I think we talked about this last time, that's contradictory to the mind, right?
Right.
You shouldn't have to increase FTEs if you have fewer kids.
Right, I'm not suggesting that we should do that. I'm just curious of what the impact in the long term is, and it is starting to sound more and more like the high school schedule and the ability for students to choose what they're doing. And I mean, if we're talking about different music classes and I mean, as a Milford Public School graduate, I didn't take a music class since 5th grade, and it was like once a week. So that's thinking about those different changes and having the opportunities for kids who are interested to be in woodwinds, to be in music, to be in those things. Those come with not having Mrs. Neitzel drive from each school to cover it. So that's just the question.
I was gonna make that next connection, glad you did. That shared staffing right now is an efficiency in budgeting, actually. But that causes all kinds of problems at the elementary and middle school level particularly. So in order to fix that problem, we have to round FTEs up, which is always logical, because then those teachers may be seeing more classes with smaller groups of kids. So it's an affordability issue at the point. So when we get to 3.0 and then in 2 years we bring to you a revised elementary schedule, it all starts to make sense, right? That maybe we need to revisit FTEs that are shared because of the needs at both levels. So good question, I just want to make connections for you.
Sounds good, thank you.
Any other questions? Great, excellent questions, board. Thank you.
So in closing, we just want to share how grateful we are for the opportunity to get in front of you and share our thinking. So you know, when it comes to budget season, what we're building for our kids and what we want to establish. So again, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks, middle school team, appreciate it.
iPhone 14 Pro.
Is that one out right now? 14?
It's out.
Oh. Wow. You just said iPhone 14 Pro. So middle school team, just like our high school reps, you probably have homework or something to do, right? So feel free to not stick around for policy talk, okay?
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for attending.
Thank you again.
Everybody okay? So I'd like to continue the superintendent's report by moving us on to the budget priorities and assumptions for the 23-24 school year. We took the feedback that the Board of Education provided us from last meeting during the first read. And I'll bring your attention to the budget priorities page. The feedback, I think, is reflected there in the second bullet, third bullet under. At one board member's recommendation, we use the word, an additional verb there, and refine. And then I'll call your attention to the assumptions. We did add, you'll see in red, in the sixth bullet down, a statement about health insurance plans for retirees and the projected increase of 8 to 10%. That continues to be a challenge. Health insurance costs are rising all the time, and we were given that information. We're looking at a significant increase once again. And then based on a Board of Ed feedback, the second to last bullet, Mr. Riccitelli worked on a revision based on some old language and an expressed interest in your part to revisit that. Did I get that right? You did. Great. Yes. We're happy to take any additional questions, Ms. Glennon, through the board.
Okay. Since this is the second reading, can we have a motion, Ms. Petrowski, first?
Motion that the Milford Board of Education approves the 2023-24 budget priorities and assumptions as presented.
I second that.
Seconded by Mr. Fowler. Do you have any questions or comments from board members on what you have in front of you with the changes that have been made? Okay, seeing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you, board, appreciate that. We're gonna move on to second readings of policies. We'll get started with 1110.1, communications with parents. We don't believe there were any additional changes here.
Ms. Petrowski, do you have a motion?
I do. Motion that the Milford Board of Education approves Board Policy 1110.1, communications with parents, guardians, as presented.
Your second?
I second.
Second by Mr. Fowler. Do we have any questions, comments, concerns from board members? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Second policy before you for approval is minimum duty-free lunch periods for teachers, 4113.12 4213.12.
Ms. Petrosky, do you have a motion?
Motion that the Milford Board of Education approves Board Policy 4113.12, 4213.12, minimum duty-free lunch periods for teachers as presented.
Do you have a second?
I second.
Mr. Fowler seconds. Any questions, concerns, comments? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
And finally, we bring your attention to school calendar, policy 6111. We did make a change in that first paragraph to make it flow a little bit more easily based on your feedback. Hopefully that worked.
Ms. Petrosky, motion?
Motion that the Milford Board of Education approves Board Policy 6111, school calendar as presented.
Is there a second?
I second.
Mr. Fowler seconds. Any questions, comments, concerns? Thank you for making the change. I do see that it
Thank you.
moves much more, flows much more readily. Any other questions? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you, board members. We'll be moving on to the October 1st, 2022 enrollment report. So in front of you are October 1st numbers, which are technically end of business day, September 30th, because October 1st was a Saturday this year. So I'll just walk you through each level based on what we are anticipating and what we experienced. So at the elementary level, we have 2,487 students enrolled. We were projecting 2,455 students. That gives us an addition of 32 students at the elementary level. I'll tell you that those experiences of additional students come all throughout the 8, but we saw a significant jump at Live Oaks and Mathewson, where there were 16 and 15 more students enrolled than anticipated. It was the increase across the 8, though, that helped us sustain the significant decrease at Meadowside. We have 35 fewer students at Meadowside enrolled than we are anticipating. We still need time to look into, the transition from, who was here in first grade and didn't come back in second and why. That takes a little bit of unraveling over 35 students, but that was a significant change at Meadowside. So those are the 3 schools out of the 8 that really stand out on changes. I mean, there were differences, like at Calf Penn, there were 10 more students than anticipated. So we had big changes like that, and then compared to Pumpkin, where we had 5 more students than anticipated. So we had big double-digit changes and then single-digit changes, sorry. At the middle school level, we were anticipating 1,217 students, but 1,204 are enrolled, so that gives us 13 students fewer. And at the high school level, we were anticipating 1,619 students. We have 1,647, that gives us 28 students more than anticipated. And in the end, we were anticipating 5,291 students. We are on October 1st at 5,338 students, giving us 47 more students than we were projecting. So primarily we see that because of increases at the elementary and the high schools.
Questions from board members? Mr. Dion?
I know that the pandemic plays a large role in this. Are you able to draw any conclusions from the fact that enrollment went up compared to your predictions? Or is it just so, disjointed because of the pandemic?
I think I don't wanna take the easy way out here, I think it's just still disjointed, we haven't had time to work with our demographers and statisticians to take a look at October 1st, because it's 9 days later, right?
Sure.
We sent all our numbers over to a couple of demographers to take a look at projections. So we have plans to talk to them before we come to budget season. The hardest number to predict is always kindergarten.
Right.
And so if I take a look at the 21-22 number of kindergarteners. We had 365 students in 21-22, and we have 372 students in kindergarten this year. So that's not a wildly different number. So now that takes us into analyzing the other grades, which we just haven't had time to jump into. If we take a look at the other grades, we're looking at the biggest difference in 4th grade and 5th grade. If I, just in a quick scan.
Yeah.
So those are the 2 grades that we were most off on our predictions. That worries me a little bit though, because like when I'm looking at Meadowside, our biggest differences in numbers are in K1, 2. So that means now we have 3 years of that number growing into the school. So if we're at 269 right now, which is a low elementary number, we have to work with our demographers. So what does that mean for years to come?
Right.
Because those 3 grades will continue to flow through the school. Kindergarten is unpredictable, depending on housing market. Meadowside probably is our most transient school out of all 8. So we need to keep an eye on Meadowside and see what's happening and what is the 3 lower grades in K1, 2 mean for us.
So that's like the school that you're laser focused on enrollment wise.
Yeah, and I have no control over it.
Of course,
Like
yeah.
going to real estate,
Right,
inside
yeah,
job,
right,
right?
right, sure.
I can remember when, because I'm in the Meadowside district, many years ago when my kids were going through Meadowside. Meadowside's it's a neighborhood where the homeowners tend to age in their spots, and then so it's kind of cyclical. There's times when the elder homeowners, they leave and so the houses turn over to younger
Right.
families versus them holding on to their houses, so that there isn't a lot of turnover. And I think that, I can remember the Meadowside, the years my kids were there, the enrollment was very, it was like a roller coaster. It would go up and down, and in terms of the increase, and there was a big increase for a number of years that prompted an addition at Meadowside. So it's a difficult, but I think it has a lot to do with the housing. So, but I was encouraged to see an increase in the elementary numbers. So.
Yeah, that's good for the system, right?
Yeah,
So as long as we can hold on to those kids, that means there are 32 more kids working through the system. And I think it's unusual to have an increase in high school outside of freshman year, right? Depending on kids coming in from private schools. So.
Do you plan to, I don't know if you're tracking people that had withdrawn their children to keep them home during the pandemic that might now be coming back?
For homeschooling, you mean?
Do you track that at all?
Not generally.
Okay.
We have a process of approving homeschooling. What we do, which is on the calendar for this week, is track the number of students in and out of private schools. So that is our work this week. We normally look at who has decided to go to private school, who's coming back, what grades, particularly in the upper grades is our focus because the impact on high school selection, et cetera. So we do a little bit of that analysis, but not homeschool necessarily.
Any other questions from board members? Okay, thank you for the report.
Thank you. Let me finish up. So, Ms. Capazza cannot be with us this evening. So, the 3 of us are gonna try to handle the HR report together. But as you see, I'm gonna try to sound like Ms. Capazza. Before you is this month's report on job postings and vacancies, right? Isn't that how she sounds sometimes?
Yeah.
And personal recommendations before you, and advisory stipends, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. How did I do?
Nailed it.
Isn't that how it runs? Yeah.
The report is fairly self-explanatory, right? Board members, do we have any questions?
A quick question.
Yes.
I was reading through the stipends. Can you tell me what a chemical hygiene monitor is?
Yes.
Under the high school?
Again, a chemical hygiene monitor, we're required to have a science teacher who keeps track of the chemicals that they use in the science classes. That person is the person in the school who's responsible for those chemicals, and they get a stipend for that.
Thank you.
Any other questions from board members? Okay, I see none. No further, thank you.
Thank you for being gentle on us. I'll turn things over to Mr. Riccicelli for the next two items, our quarterly budget report and our disbursement report.
Thank you, Dr. Paya, Mrs. Glenn, members of the board. You have in your package the quarterly budget report. As you know, this is the first quarter of our fiscal year. So we're really just, we're just starting out. But as I explain at this point every year, the numbers that you see, especially in the last two columns, the available balance and the percentage used, is the amount that we've either encumbered or spent. So the difference, an encumbrance, is an amount of money that's reserved for known costs. So you'll see on, just as an example, on the teachers line, account 1111, certified teachers, their salaries, that's the biggest account. You can see that we've encumbered 99%, almost 100% of the teachers line, because that's what we expect to spend, and we don't want to use that money for anything else. And so it's, we do an encumbrance for those things that we know are gonna be spent. They fluctuate throughout the year because sometimes we have vacancies, so it may go up a little bit or down, but we have to reserve the amount of money that we know we're gonna spend. Obviously, we haven't spent that yet because we're only 1 month into the school year. But there are other columns, or I'm sorry, there are other categories where it's actually what we've spent. And those are the kinds of things like purchases. Things where we purchase instructional supplies and things like that. You'll see that we've only spent about 25%, which is where we should be at this point, because we don't encumber the full amount. We reduce the amount that we've spent. So it's either encumbrance or spending. Although by your policy governance, we give you a budget report once every quarter. I think you know by now that we're looking at the budget all the time, weekly, sometimes daily. We're looking at the budget and any kind of stressors that there may be. I'm happy to report at this point, there's really nothing that surprises us. There's a couple of areas where we need to watch. One in particular is the gasoline and the fuel for the buses. I mean, that's obvious. We know that the cost of diesel and gasoline is, although has come down a little bit, is now creeping back up, but it's way higher than it was at this time last year. So those are the kinds of things that we're watching. We will always, where we know we're gonna have a deficit, like in that account, we will stop spending in other accounts. We always make adjustments throughout the year so that at the end, we have a balanced budget. The last thing that I'll say, because there really is no anything that stands out as far as an expenditure that would raise an eyebrow or anything like that. But the last thing I'll say is on page 2 of the report, you will see deficits in transportation, special ed, internal. That's account 5101, and you also see a deficit in 5600, tuition, special education, public. I always point out at this point that in special education, transportation, and tuitions, we're going to see significant deficits, but those accounts, for the most part, will be reimbursed by the state's excess cost grant. So we don't get alarmed when we see deficit in those accounts at this point of the year. We expect it, and most of that will be covered by the excess cost grant. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Questions from board members? Ms. Wolf Boynton?
Mr. Riccitelli, what about the legal fees on page 1?
Okay, thank you. That might be one that we want to look at. This is an extraordinary year. We're in negotiations with 4 of our unions, and so those costs add up. We've also had mediations, we've also had arbitrations in grievances. Some of the hearings that the board has seen, those are all very costly. And so this is kind of an unusual year, but we are definitely going to have a deficit in legal expenses because of those extraordinary things that are happening this year. Thank you for pointing that out.
Are we expecting them to continue, or?
Well, they probably will continue through this year. We've only settled with one of our 4 unions, and we haven't even ratified it yet. But so those negotiations do continue. So yeah, that's going to add up, and hopefully, the hearings and things that your board sees will start to die off a little bit. But
So those things have continued beyond the board level?
Yes.
I think I've kept you guys updated on that?
Yeah. And those are all legal costs
Yeah.
for us.
Okay. Thank you.
Ms. Doyle?
This is a little tangential, but on on the last line before general fund, 8209.
Yeah.
Are we noticing, I know that was always one of those things where we've needed to increase the budget in that space because of money coming in.
Yeah.
Have you noticed that sporting events are much more well-attended
Yes, they
than
are.
everything else? How is that, where is that?
Yeah, that's a real, we were just talking about that today with the athletic directors, because I'm starting to prepare the athletic financial report that comes to the board in December. The attendance is way up. And one of the reasons, well, probably the main reason, is because we're having really successful teams this year. Both football programs are 4-0, which is not really all that heard of in Milford Public Schools. So at 4-0 for both of our high schools, we are seeing much bigger crowds and a better gate. But that's not the reason for that you don't see anything spent at this point. It's because last year in that account, we had some sports that had schedules curtailed. We didn't spend as much for officials last year as we thought we would have because of the COVID and from the previous year's carryover. So we're still working off last year's dollars for officials. And that's what comes out of that line.
Got it.
So we haven't spent anything in it yet because of past year. And we hope that the gate is going to be much bigger than it has been in the past also.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Dion?
Thank you. Mr. Riccitelli, could you just explain what account 3305 is, security services?
Sure. That, the bulk of that account is our ongoing maintenance costs for things like the buzzer systems at the doors, the A-phones, our intrusion alarms, our fire alarms. That's the bulk of that. And then there are also some things that the board has approved in the regular budget for security enhancements.
So like you walk up to this school and there's a little intercom, that's the type of thing you're talking about?
Yes,
Good.
because there's annual maintenance fees
Sure.
and there's annual service fees that go
Okay.
along with those.
How long have we had those? Have we had those for quite a long time?
The A-phones themselves, that's the brand.
Yeah.
The A-phone, they've been in existence since we received a grant after Columbine.
Okay. Oh, wow.
So the technology has changed, but we've had buzzers at the doors since, I want to say, like the early 2000s.
Okay.
As I say, the technology has gotten better over the years, but that's how long we've had that kind of security technology at the door.
Does this line item cover improvement in the technology of that type of thing?
Yes.
It does. So
Yes.
that's not something you would have to come to us and say, we have to replace all the call boxes in all the schools?
No. Well, it would come out of there. that's where whenever we're doing maintenance or whenever we're replacing things, it comes out of that account.
Okay.
That's why I say the bulk of it is really just keeping up with the system. Enhancements are also in there, but it's a small percentage of the total amount in the security budget.
Okay, all right, thank you.
When we have major enhancements, they're normally highlighted during the budget
Yeah.
discussions, as much as they can be.
Yes.
Any other questions from board members? Mr. Fowler?
Thank you, Ms. Lennon. Just a quick question. Do we still, if there are deficits in other areas, do we still have COVID relief money that could help out with covering those costs? I forget when the timeline is, when all that
Yeah,
is.
we still, the ESSER 2 grant runs through through 2023. And the ARP grant runs through 2024, and there's a possibility, or it may have already been extended, but right now. So there are monies, but they're pretty much earmarked for things that we're planning on spending.
Right, okay.
And there's, one of those funds has very strict rules around how to spend it,
Okay.
the ARP money. So they're really pushing toward recovery and acceleration instructionally.
Okay, good, thank you.
Other questions from board members? Okay, thank you, we can move on.
Sure. Also in your package is the disbursement report, which catalogs all of the disbursements for the district over the amount of $1,500. And highlighted in yellow are the COVID-related expenses. And as you can see, we're starting to dwindle on those, but yeah, then I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. I will point out on the last page, the last page of that's the grants disbursements. So obviously those ESSER and ARP were spending money out of those grants and reimbursing on that. Those are most of the expenses that are on the grants page.
Questions, board members? Okay, I've seen none. Thank you.
Thank you.
That completes the superintendent's report, Ms. Lennon.
Thank you, Dr. Buchaya. Ms. Petrosky, can we move on to consent agenda?
Motion that the Milford Board of Education approves consent agenda items, minutes for consideration, September 12th, 2022 business meeting, September 27th, 2022 committee of the whole meeting.
Is there a second?
A second.
Mr. Fowler seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Board comment? Mr. DeYoung.
Thank you. I know that you have one more meeting with us, but we don't have board comment next time, so I just wanted to say thank you for your service to our community. You've been a cheerleader for the public schools, Betsy, and you'll be sorely missed. So thank you for being a colleague for so many times.
I can't disagree with that. Very well said, Mr. DeYoung. Anybody else? Board comment? Ms. Petrosky?
I just want to echo exactly what Mr. DeYoung said. She's been a very valuable member, and it's been a pleasure. We're going to miss you.
Yeah, I think we all feel the same way.
I'll miss you all too.
Any other board comment? I had the pleasure of attending the planetarium rededication. The ribbon cutting is fabulous. It really, I think it's an incredible asset for the community and for Milford Public Schools. The instructor who led a little demonstration was perfect.
She was excellent.
Can't say enough nice things about her. So I look forward to hearing more about how we're going to utilize this wonderful facility. It's really great. Okay, and seeing no other comments, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Mr. Fowler has seconded. Do we have any objections to adjourning at 8:23? Seeing none, we are adjourned. See everybody in 2 weeks.
Thank you.